Welcome back. Now I would request our Vice President membership, uh, Mr. Saji Chako, to introduce the next speaker, Willem from Chimp Insights. Recently, he has come up with a report on Broodstock. I mean, most of us have gone through that. So now Saji would invite Willem to give a talk on European markets.
Thank you, Ravi. Good evening. Our next speaker is Mr. Willem van der Pelt. He'll be talking about the European market, post-COVID situation, and some insights on the Christmas and New Year purchase strategies. Mr. Willem has a broad understanding of the shrimp industry as a result of his vast field experience in major shrimp producing countries. As an industry analyst, he has a thorough understanding of the structure and dynamics of the shrimp markets and shrimp producing countries. His expertise covers the input, farming, processing, export, import, and the market distribution segments of the industry. He knows where to find the best data sources and how to work with it to strengthen fact-based reporting. Over the past 10 years, he has worked with the shrimp sectors in Europe, US, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Ecuador, and Peru. The list is big. And everyone from SAP is a very familiar face. His presentation will provide us with the insights of the European market situation for Asian shrimp and the outlook towards the end of 2020. Welcome, Mr. Willem. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Let me try to share my screen with you. Yeah, so thanks Society of Agriculture Professionals for inviting me once more to talk to you about the dynamics and the developments in the shrimp industry. And today I will really focus on what's happening in the European market. Yeah, so actually it's when I was preparing this presentation, it was quite a thing to remember that the last time that I talked to you was during the conference in Cochin, which was last February, I believe. And then I remember that we got this little bag of the association with a couple of gifts and souvenirs. And in there was a little bottle with alcohol. I believe it was really the start of the pandemic, and I'm actually still using that little bottle from India with German alcohol to clean my hands before entering the car and touching my wheel. So yeah, of course, when I think for me that trip to India, it was my last trip before COVID really started to surge in Europe, and we had a major surge in cases during March, April, and May. But after that, actually, it seemed that things were getting under control. Unfortunately, after a very quiet summer, it seems that things in Europe are really not going well. So on the map on the screen, you can see this is the map of 2 or 3 days back, and it shows the number of cases per 100,000 people. So you can see that especially in Southern Europe, in Spain and the southern part of France, but also in some parts, even in the Netherlands, where I'm based, we really are now facing a resurgence of the virus. And I think that yesterday, it was the first day that the chief doctor monitoring all this case development in the Netherlands was saying that we were possibly now at the start of the second wave. And I think that's a very concerning fact. Although it's still not clear to me personally. Luckily, I'm not an expert in COVID, but it's for me as a Dutch citizen, it's not really clear what it means. Because if you look at this graph, you see the number of positive tests versus the hospitalization numbers. So as you can see on the right end of the first graph, the graph on top, we are now at a higher positive test count than we were earlier this year. But of course, you know, like, what does it actually say? Not that much, because back then we were testing much less than we are now. And if you look at the lower graph, you see that actually the number of people that submitted to the hospital in the Netherlands is still at a very low level compared to March and April this year. That said, yesterday in a television conference, they showed that the hockey stick that we are also afraid of, in which COVID really increases more rapidly than anyone can predict, that it might happen again. And this may result in a very difficult situation in the next couple of months, in which, while the virus started to research again among students, people in their 20s and 30s, now, I believe yesterday, the data showed that 10% of the people that are going to the test facilities are people in their 60s and older. And of course, with that number of people increasing, also the number of hospitalizations, etc., will increase. And, you know, like, why that is relevant for this presentation is, of course, because that may result in increased pressure of political parties throughout Europe to actually increase the measures that are in place. While at this moment, to be honest, I think we are very lucky. We have very relaxed lockdowns. We can go out for dinner. There's not such a lot of trouble as long as we keep a 1.5 meter distance. That is the guideline that we should follow. But with this number of cases of people being admitted to the hospital increasing, you already notice in the day-to-day media that there is an increased call for more stringent measures. And how that will work out, we'll have to see. But what will be different from the first wave is that while in the first wave we had national measures, so the Netherlands had a lockdown, Spain had a lockdown, etc., and now it seems that the governments throughout Europe have decided to take a very location-specific lockdown, which means that actually they will only implement more stringent measures in those provinces or in those cities where the cases are actually surging. So a full lockdown, as we have experienced earlier this year, is unlikely to happen. And I guess that's a good thing. So today I will first take you to the trade data of the first half of the year. Unluckily, we don't have the same amount of data available for Europe as Angel has for the US. So we have to deal with a little bit more backlog in terms of what we can analyze from the data. But still, it will give you, I think, a very valuable insight in what has been happening and what is happening as we speak, and also what might happen in the coming final quarter of this year, but also the first quarter of next year. So what I want to show you in this slide is the total imports of raw head-on, shell-on, and raw peeled shrimp. So this excludes cooked and other value-added products. And in Europe, this is actually by far the major volume of warm water shrimp that is being imported into the European Union. And yeah, maybe if someone from the UK is listening, they are not so happy, but I excluded the UK from this data, and I will show you a little bit on the UK in a different slide. Yeah. So the HS code 030617 has all species within the warm water shrimp category. So that means it includes Argentinian shrimp, it includes Van de Mee, it includes wild-caught pink shrimp from Asia, and it includes the wild-caught warm water shrimp from China. Yeah, so this is quite a big volume. It's 400,000 tons in 2019. As you look on the graph, you can see that actually in the beginning of this year, imports were not that bad. Actually, the growth trend that we have been seeing over the past couple of years for European shrimp imports continued. It was only in April, May, and June when the lockdowns throughout Europe came into effect that also the imports actually dipped below the level of 2019. And that was the... Oh, I'm getting photos whether I can increase the size of my screen. Let me try. I hope it's better now, but Vijay, if you can let me know because you were messaging me. Okay, let me continue like this. I hope it's better now. I took off my second screen, so I hope you can see the presentation in full screen now. But otherwise, I'll share my presentation also, of course, with SAP afterwards, so you can look at the graphs in more detail. Yeah. So good. So you see that the total imports over the first half of the year are only down by 6%, but in April, May, and June, imports dipped by 11%, 39%, and 9%. The problem of working with these HS codes that we don't know yet at the six-digit level, whether this is Van de Mee or Argentinian shrimp or whatever, it only gives an overall image, an overall view of what has been happening with imports. So if we look at the 8-digit level, we take the 03061792, which only includes Penaeus shrimp. So this includes Van de Mee shrimp and monodon shrimp. It can also include wild-caught Penaeus shrimp, but this category, of course, primarily represents Van de Mee shrimp. And it's actually very interesting to look at this data because, first of all, it's only 254,000 tons. So that's only 65% of the entire group, which people normally look at when analyzing this data. So it's much smaller than one might expect from the higher digit level. And as you can see, the trend has been slightly different. So while for the overall warm water shrimp imports, we saw a decline of 6%, for Van de Mee shrimp, we see a decline for only 1%. Further, the same trend, January, February, March were very strong months, and imports only started to decline in April, May, and June, and especially May and June. So a little bit later than for the overall warm water shrimp imports. What this suggests is that the lockdown has affected other species more than Van de Mee, which is logical because in Europe, Van de Mee shrimp is more a retail product than a food service product. relative to the other species. So if you look at monodon or if you look at Argentinian red shrimp, is much more a food service product than a retail product. So this data also confirms that retail sales have actually done much better and were much less hit than, of course, the food service sales in Europe. So in this table, you can see this in more detail for the different countries in the different member states. And they are listed from large to big. So of course, the big volumes of shrimp are imported in Southern Europe, in Spain and France, especially. And here's this first interesting difference. If you look at Spain, you can see that the total import under 030617 is almost 50 or more than 50,000 tons, while the import under 92 was less than 30,000, while in France it's actually the other way around. So it's 34,000 tons in total, but 31,000 tons for 92, which means again that in France, Vannemey represents a much bigger part of the total shrimp market than in Spain. Yeah. If you look at the green and the red colors on the right column of the table, there I've indicated in which countries did the import of Vannemey decrease less or even grow compared to the total import of warm water shrimp under 030617. You can see that actually in the biggest markets, Spain, France, Netherlands and Belgium, this is all the case. Only in Italy, Greece and Denmark, the imports of Vannemey declined more than the overall warm water shrimp imports. So interesting as well is that the Netherlands and Belgium actually year on year compared to 2019 in terms of Vannemey imports are still way ahead of 2019. So even though they had this very big slump due to the lockdown in April and May, they are still ahead of the 2019 figures. So this is the trend in Southern Europe, and in the graph you see the growth rates year on year from month to month. So also in France, Spain, and Italy, if we look at the trend, we see that the start of the year was very strong. April and May year on year growth dropped, and in June, especially in France and in Portugal, we already saw that imports revived. And this is very important to realize that although the lockdown was there, already early summer, food service sales started to improve, and many of the companies who previously cancelled their orders during March, April and May, they reordered those containers 1 or 2 months later, and they started coming in already in June. And we expect, although the data is not yet there, that in July and August we will actually see that European imports of Vannemey shrimp have outperformed 2019. And this is mainly due to a very good summer and the fact that people who stayed at home, instead of going on a holiday abroad, they celebrated their holiday in their own country, and they went out for dinner much more than they would do in a normal year. Yeah, and you see that in Spain and Italy, where normally shrimp consumption is also much more linked to tourism, to foreign tourists coming to the Spanish coast or to Italy. That there, in that case, you see that revival was not yet there, at least not in June. We have to wait and see what we see happening for July and August. So in Northern Europe, you see this trend even much more clearly. So again, strong first 3 months of the year, weak April and May, but a strong growth already again in June. And what I did here is you see the pink line between the blue lines, and the pink line is for the 3 countries combined, because the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, we are 3 independent countries, but in terms of the movement of shrimp, is actually one market, because Dutch importers, they import through Belgium, German importers import through the Netherlands. So there's a lot of product moving between the 3 countries, which eventually results in the fact that you better look at these 3 countries as a single market. And altogether, in the 3 countries, year on year, shrimp imports have been 6% up, Vaname imports. So if we then look at the supply side to Europe, we see that actually Ecuador and Venezuela, the 2 top 5 suppliers from South America, and they have been outperforming themselves in compared to 2019. India, Vietnam, and also Bangladesh. Bangladesh, of course, for Monodon, not for Vaname, have seen year-on-year declines. And the difference here is, of course, that Ecuador and Venezuela is mainly head-on shell-on shrimp for the cooking market in Southern Europe, while India, Vietnam, and Bangladesh mainly supply the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and part of especially northern France with the peeled markets. What for me was again an important realization is that even though the volume is small, so India in 2019 in the whole year supplied almost 30,000 tons of raw, peeled, and headless shell-on Vaname to Europe, it is still the largest supplier of peeled shrimp. And of course, you can see that Vietnam actually dropped 15%, which is quite surprising because Vietnam has a free trade agreement in place from May onwards. But they seem to have had trouble finding a market for the raw peeled products in Europe in the first half of this year. But India is the largest supplier of peeled shrimp, despite all the issues that India is confronted with in terms of food safety regulations, which I will get back to a little bit later on. So here, of course, the trend of the main suppliers, and you see more or less the same trends as we saw when we looked at the importer. But interesting here is where you see the red line and the red dot that actually you can see that from May to June, Vietnamese imports, indeed, at the moment that the FTA was implemented, researched the quickest, so much quicker than imports from India. For raw peeled shrimp, so for this HS code, Vietnam's duty has been reduced to 0%. While India at this moment is paying a 4 or 4.2% duty on raw peeled shrimp. Okay, so far I've been speaking about raw peeled shrimp because for you in India, that is the main product that you are supplying to Europe. But of course, we also have a market for cooked shrimp. But it's very small. So yes, there is a market for cooked and other value-added products, but it's only in 2019, it was only 32,000 tons compared to a total volume of about 700,000 tons that's imported in Europe in terms of shrimp. So that's very small. And what I did here is I excluded all imports of cooked and value-added shrimp from other regions, because otherwise it would get mixed up with cold water shrimp, which is in the same HS codes. So in this graph, you see the cooked and value-added shrimp imports from Asia, which is for 70% supplied by Vietnam. Vietnam is still supplying Europe a cooked shrimp with a 7% duty, which will reduce to 0% over the next couple of years. So contrary to for raw peeled shrimp, where the reduction of duty was from one day to the other, for cooked and other value-added products, it will be a couple of years before the duty is also reduced to 0%. So for cooked shrimp, we might have expected to see less of a decrease during the lockdown in April and May, because it's more of a retail product than a food service product. But that is actually not the case. So for the whole year, we see a decline of 4% of cooked and value-added shrimp exports to Europe. So the UK then, no longer part of the EU, but of course still part of Europe. And actually, if you would look at Europe as a continent as a whole, the UK is the biggest market for raw peeled shrimp on the European continent. What I've done in this graph, I've combined the imports of raw peeled shrimp. Again, the 8 digits, so this is mainly Vaneme and also a little bit of Monodon, and the cooked and other value-added shrimp. And in this case, you see that indeed, in the UK, while the import of raw peeled shrimp drastically increased, even much more than in mainland Europe, by 23% in the first 6 months, the imports of cooked shrimp only declined by 11%. So combined, the UK imports this year so far, up to June, have been down by 15%. And of course, this is again an indication that also in the UK, retail sales of shrimp have been relatively strong compared to the raw products. So yes, unfortunately for July and August, there is no import data available, but most of the companies in the Netherlands, Belgium and Germany that I've spoken to in recent weeks indicate that they had an extraordinarily strong summer, which they did not expect, which they did not anticipate. But it means that what I already said, the restaurants have adjusted very rapidly to the COVID situation. They managed to get approval of the governments to expand their outdoor terraces. So you saw that the outdoor terraces were twice as big as they were normally, enabling them to have more guests. And also people had to make a reservation to go out for dinner, which means that while earlier, of course, you would have much more peak moments during, let's say 6 to 8, we eat very early. So we have early peaking times in the restaurants. But now the restaurant occupation would be much more stable throughout the evening and throughout the week. Yeah, so most of the companies selling into the restaurant sector indicate that they have been able to make up for their losses during the lockdown, in especially the end of June, July, and the first 3 weeks of August. So as that demand was much higher than people expected, prices during those months, especially during July, actually increased in the market here. So not the import prices, but the prices from wholesale to the restaurants, which encouraged, of course, many of the importers that were not working with stocks to actually start ordering new containers. And what you heard about 3 weeks back, let's say end of August, first week September, everyone was telling that they were placing new orders to replenish their stocks because stocks during summer had been really well sold. That said, most of the importers that you talk to, whether they are in retail or food service, They are all very worried about the last couple of months of the year, especially, of course, due to food service. It has been mentioned already by also by Angel, but also by George. I believe that restaurants will close down, although some terraces in some cities get approval to keep their terraces during winter. You can imagine that in your winter jacket, in the rain and in the snow, sure, there will be people that make use of the opportunity, or there might be innovative setups such as on the photo, as you see in the presentation, but sales will go down. And one of the big wholesalers in the Netherlands voiced their expectation that the wholesale index, so looking at Q4 of this year compared to Q4 of last year, of 0.7, so 30% less sales might be realistic. But again, you know, if you look at the division between wholesale and retail, and then you look at a 30% decline of sales in wholesale, overall, at the end of the year, having these very strong summer months still in mind, I expect that you will see that although the numbers for October, November, December may show year-on-year decline, at the end of the year, we might have imported around the same volume of raw material, of finished product, sorry, as we did in 2019. And yeah, I think important to mention here is also that because most of the importers are careful with this very weak outlook for Q4, even though they are replenishing their stock, so they are placing new orders, or these have been placed now, and they will be coming in September, maybe early October. It means that until the end of the year, and probably even until January, February, new order placement will be relatively low. But it also means that if COVID does not get too serious during winter, and people or the situation recovers early next year, that I foresee a strong demand both from retail and food service for spring 2021, which of course normally starts the buying season in March. So yeah, just to conclude one more time, we had a strong start of the year, a weak April and May. The first signs of recovery of the market were already there in June. July and August were extraordinarily good, but the outlook for the remainder of the year is bleak, and real full swing demand might not occur again before March 2021. Okay, then I was asked not only to look at this very short-term outlook and what has been happening this year so far, but also to speak a little bit about the overall potential that India has in the European market. So I'll take a couple of minutes to share my thoughts with you on that. Yeah. So if we look on the long-term trend, of course, which has been influenced heavily by the disagreement between the European food safety authorities and the Indian food safety authorities, especially the Export Inspection Agency, but also MPDA is heavily involved in the discussions, I guess, together with authorities in Brussels, that still, as of 2017, heavy measures on the imports of Indian shrimp are in place, meaning that now, today, 100% of the containers that are supplied to Europe from India will be checked by the port authorities for especially antibiotics. But many other measures are in place in India, you know better than I do. But if an exporter is caught with a positive test for a container, he might be delisted for approval to the EU. And once delisted, the EU will not allow a factory to get relisted, which is of course a terrible situation because it means that you can supply 10 containers without a problem. You have one positive test, you lose your EU number, and you don't know when you get it back. I believe that at this moment, 15 to 20 Indian factories are delisted. They have submitted plans to the authorities in India, who submitted them to the EU to get relisted, but so far the EU is not permitting that to happen. So as you can see in the graph, the exports dropped 25% during that time. Yeah, so while before there was 55,000 tons, now it's just about 40,000 tons. Netherlands, Belgium, UK and Germany account for 70% of the total imports and are all negatively affected by this situation. Interestingly, exports to France, Portugal, Spain and Italy, of course, where the volumes are much smaller for Indian shrimp, but they dropped even harder, probably because the difficult early starting relationships that were developed there could not really deal with all these measures in place. Yeah, of course, the market for Europe is still there. So who is taking that market from India is an important question to look at. And one of the answers is Vietnam. So while India is struggling with a lot of trouble to enter the European market, Vietnam has actually improved its access to the European market. The most important part there is the European-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement, which has been negotiated for many years, which came into effect in May, but of course, which already caused many buyers to look at Vietnam as a good source for shrimp for Europe. On top of that, Vietnam has the biggest number of ASC certified farms. There is a wide choice for European buyers that are selling into the retail channel to source from different factories in Vietnam that are doing monodon and vaname and have both species certified by ASC, but also with the factories, for example, certified by BSCI for social compliance. I think that the retail sector in Northwestern Europe is the hardest sector to enter, but it's the sector that also offers you as a supplier most stability. So I think that most of the big Indian exporters like Devi Seafoods, Devi Fisheries, Nekanti, but also the other big groups, they all have the ambition or they all have the desire to do more direct business with European retail. But in order to be able to do that, you need to be able to compete with these companies in Vietnam that are at this moment much better positioned to do so. And although Vietnam is already dominating the market for cooked products in Northwestern Europe, we expect that also for the raw peeled products and the headless chalon raw products that Vietnam will increase its market share, and that might very well be at the cost of India. That said, I think many of the buyers active in these segments, they really want to continue buying from India because they don't want to be in the situation that they are over-dependent on Vietnam. So the strategy that many of the bigger buyers will take is that they buy from both sources, they mix the lots, and they will level the price so that overall the price that they offer to their client is still competitive, but that they can deal with the price difference between Vietnam and India as a result of this free trade agreement, the 0% duty for Vietnam, but also because of the added cost for importing out of India because of the extra testing requirements in the port, which might add another 1 or 2% for each container. To be very honest with you, the biggest threat I see for India, but in general for Asian shrimp in Northwestern Europe, is competition from South and Central America. Yeah, and I will show you in a couple of slides why I'm a little bit concerned about that. So let's talk about the Netherlands again. Yeah, so if you look at this graph, you see that from 2015 2019 there have been a very steady increase first, but from 2018 2019 a very rapid increase of imports from South and Central America. And we are speaking about Ecuador, but Ecuador is not the only country in South and Central America that is increasing its production. Especially Venezuela is becoming a very dominant player on the European market, both for head-on shell-on and for peeled products. But we also speak about countries like Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, which all try to find markets for their products. So this started with organic shrimp. Yeah, because of course, like normally, up to recently, the idea of European buyers has always been like, South America is too expensive, you cannot compete. Well, in organic, you have a 15 to 20% premium in the market. So of course, there is space to source from different origins. Also, Asia cannot supply organic Vaname because according to the organic standards, you can only certify a species that is native to the geography by the organic standards. So Ecuador was in a very good position to capture this market for organic shrimp, for organic Vaname shrimp in Europe, not only Northwestern Europe, but also in Southern Europe. And as you see, this is often in peeled products. Yeah, so we often say like Ecuador is not competitive with peeled products. It's true, but in the case of a premium product such as organic, the premium price that the market is willing to pay also allows to cover those relatively high labor costs in South America. What happened then is that actually you saw that in retail, so these are packages of Albertijn in the biggest supermarket in the Netherlands, that you suddenly saw more head-on shell-on shrimp coming into the market. And these were normally mixed lots. So it's a mix of products. If you look on the package of shrimp from Ecuador, Honduras, Venezuela, Guatemala, Nicaragua, which is mixed as a lot and then packaged and often cooked at origin to be supplied into the retail market here. But this is still not so threatening for Asia, is it? Because you, as Asian producers, as Indian producers, the amount of head-on shell-on shrimp that you can do is very limited. So for the Ecuadorians, I always say, head-on shell-on is their core business and peeled products is their byproduct. But for Asian suppliers, peeled products is the core business. And if you can do a small volume of head-on shell-on shrimp, you are in a good position, but it's a byproduct, it's a niche product. So looking back at this big jump from 2018 to 2019, this has been caused by a sudden shift of some of the big retailers in the Netherlands who have said, we will shift our entire assortment from Asian shrimp to South American shrimp. So here on the package, this is a bag of shrimp at Lidl. In which you can see there is written on the package that is farmed in semi-intensive farms in Honduras, Ecuador, and or Venezuela. So I don't know the exact figures, but what we have heard or what we hear in the market here is that Lidl accepted a higher price for the whole assortment. So they moved up the prices by 50 cents or even by €1 per kilogram. And they then shifted from Asian shrimp to South American shrimp. And of course, leading importers such as Heiploeg, which is a big driver of the entry of South American shrimp in the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, they play a major role in this promotion of South American and Central American shrimp. They have a great story to tell. It's all plantation style farms with factories on the farms, short supply chains, very low density production systems. If you look on these packages, these are of Klaas Puhl, one of the other major suppliers of shrimp in Northwestern Europe. They really make use of this beautiful image that South and Central America have among European consumers. they use that, they try to use that in the marketing of the shrimp, but also the Ecuadorians themselves. And with the Ecuadorians, I think many of the other Central American countries benefit from that promotional activity. So with the Sustainable Shrimp Partnership, a couple of leading Ecuadorian exporters, they are pushing themselves into the market as a premium supplier, a premium quality supplier of peeled, not only head and shell-on, but also peeled Vanemais suppliers. And these kind of initiatives where they work together with the importer, the exporter, the producers, and also, for example, the industry associations, such as the Cámara Nacional de Acuicultura, they really managed to convince retailers and others to consider peeled shrimp from South and Central America as an alternative to the Asian shrimp, which is bothered by a negative market image, among others, due to, of course, the use of antibiotics and also the measures in place on India, because that is not good for the image of your country. Yesterday, I reached out to the European Food Safety Authority to ask them for an update on the situation with regard to India. And this is the summary that they were willing to share with me. So in 2019, compared to 2018, the sampling results of antibiotic usage in farms and hatcheries improved for the hatcheries, but not for the farms. So there were still the most positive tests for hatcheries, but while the number of negative tests, positive tests for hatcheries declined, for farms it actually increased. This is still a major concern to EU authorities, and as a result of those numbers, the EU authority, in response to my request, state that it is too early to reduce the sampling frequency to allow new establishments for EU approval, which means that if you build a new factory now, you cannot list it for EU approval or to relist any of the delisted establishments. Also, the 100% checks in the European ports, they will stay in place, causing a major logistical and cost challenge for importers of Indian shrimp. And the Commission, they continue to emphasize that it's the responsibility of all of the Indian industry, whether you're an importer, an importer, an hatchery operator, a farmer, to actually work together as an industry to really resolve this issue. And of course, I'm very aware that I'm not here to judge on the Indian situation. I know all the complexities also with Vietnam, where similar scenarios are there, but the authorities do not put those restrictions on Vietnam. In the end, it does not really matter, because the restrictions are there, and the restrictions have negative consequences for India, but maybe even for more of the Asian shrimp producing countries. And yeah, before you even think about developing a brand, at least in the European market, of course, George, in the US, this might be a different situation. But before you think about, could we develop a brand as India, where we promote Indian shrimp as a sustainable, high quality, responsible choice for European consumers, of course, those non-tariff barriers have to be resolved. Any brand that you build at this moment to have resonance with European consumers should include aspects, of course, that we all know: zero antibiotics, supply chain transparency, traceability, certification, both social and sustainable. And of course, in the end, you need to maintain your competitiveness on price. I am really still convinced that India can build such a brand. You have your own story to tell. It's not the same as a South American story, but you have a story of culture, of people, of smells, of small-scale farmers, of livelihoods, and of all those passionate people that build this industry. And I think that if you all work together, if you can find a way to work together, that you should really be able to start promoting yourself in a good way. I'll skip this slide because I think that I'm through my time. I'm not sure, but yeah, I want to thank you for your attention. I look forward to the discussion in the panel. And if you have any questions or if you want to download my Broodstock report, the link and my email address is here, and you know where to find me. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the seminar.
Oh, thank you very much, Willem. Thank you very much, Willem. It was a real insightful presentation. You know, we're against a lot of odds, India, to get into European market. One thing is, you know, if we compare India vis-a-vis Vietnam, they have an FTA agreement, so they have advantage of 4 to 5%, and they're into value addition, and they're able to penetrate into your retail market, whereas we are not in that kind of value addition. We are only with PD Tylons and PD Tylols. We're not ready yet with ready to eat kind of value addition. And apart from that, the non-tariff barrier of you know, antibiotic residues, it is going to you know, trouble us. It's going to haunt us. You know, it's been haunting us for long, and it continues to haunt us. So it is, to an extent, it's diplomatic. Probably it's up to our governments to deal with it, you know, and, you know, ask European Union to do away with screening of 50% of the shipments that's working against us, despite the measures what we're taking. And we're not able to tell our story to EU, as you rightly said, you know, even about antibiotics. Though our industry is completely devoid of antibiotics, we're not able to convince, you know. So we have to sell our story, you know, to the marketplace as well as to the EU agencies, you know. Then we can make a penetration again into European market, because it is one of the largest markets. If you take whole of EU, I mean, it is larger than US, you know, more than 700,000 tons, you know. But if you look at the market size, what we got to understand from your presentation is it's more or less even Steven compared to 2019. That's one good thing. But the last quarter is not going to be all that good because of the winter, and you know, you're expecting people not to go to restaurants and eat, and as such, you know, the consumption in the households is not all that good in Europe, in many of the countries. So we might not see a good market for the last quarter, but moving forward next year, first quarter is going to be good. That's good news. Probably we'll all pull up our stocks in India and try to, you know, penetrate into European market. You know, we need to. I mean, if we get into European market, we can up our ante. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult. You know, other markets look to be very, very stagnant.